it up for the host of the new podcast, Good AF, Mr. Matthew Nadu. We met originally when we bonded over our hatred for Floyd's Barbershop.
Let that be known, Floyd's Barbershop.
And
we're
we
all throughout.
I'm not gonna. Wait. We're not gonna go into details over maybe some.
Winning right now. Do you realize this, by the way?
By the way, this is the goal of this is seriously like relationship goals for me with him too. But that's beard scenario. But what I'll say is, and this is a story for another day, or a blog, or check out the hashtag Mustache Justice on my scenario of what happened to my mustache from Floyd's. Matthew again had a scenario that happened at Floyd's that we won't get into, but we bonded over that, and then we started talking about travel, and life, and all these things. But I want to set something up here because you've had some pretty rad adventures, and I really appreciate a lot of the stories you told me. But one thing I didn't know about you until we started talking was that you grew up one of how many kids?
One of 10 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, outside of Philadelphia.
So I want you to share a little bit about what it was like growing up and the adventures you guys had and that kind of stuff.
Shit. Can I swear? Is that right? All right.
Mom, it's okay, right? Yeah, see, you can swear. Yeah, he's talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and my parents are awesome. One thing that was really cool that my parents did is that we always went on a trip every year. Like, it didn't matter how many kids we had, and even if it was like going to Florida and we couldn't afford like everybody to fly on a plane, like my parents just bought like this big 15-passenger van and just stuffed everybody in there, including my grandmother and a couple cousins. And we all just like jetted down, no pit stop. Like, you had to go to the bathroom. My dad was like, hold it, fall asleep, do whatever you gotta do.
Fall asleep.
No, so we would always travel from doing that to Niagara Falls, which we went to Niagara Falls. My dad is like this really big germaphobe, so we got this like suite in Niagara Falls. I don't know if it was sweet. It felt like a suite to us. And my dad would always bring Lysol, so he's got it. They're like in his holster. My dad pulls up the Lysol and he just starts going to town. And then we realized after 10 minutes, my brother Jonathan over here, he's like, "Dad, what's all over the wood?" And he stained every piece of wood in that entire suite that we're in. It was just streaks of Lysol all over everything. So that was my dad. But we did that, and then I think their like 30th wedding anniversary, we went to Mexico. We'd always get on the Jersey Shore. We actually have a cabin.
Tell me, before we get into the cabin, tell me about these trips when you were younger. And even, you have a term for when you're taking some of the kids, you say, you took kids from, I don't want to say, I guess from inner city, other places you guys took them.
Yeah.
What did you call that?
So we did this thing, my parents are amazing, I have 5 adopted brothers and sisters, and we did this thing called the Fresh Air Fund, and it was where they would take kids from like New York, like the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, wherever, and they would basically like send them out to be like in the country, and then they would spend the summer in the country. So we got this, she's still awesome, still a good friend. Her name is Devaney. We had her, and it was so cool. I don't know, we were very blessed to just have this life where like it didn't matter where people came from or like who people were, what they looked like. Like, everybody to us was just like, this is what the reality of life is.
And I want to split up some of your family. By the way, also we got it's Matthew Nadu social. We'll put this up after again for everyone, but just I want to put on some of the family pictures because you probably saw it in your opening video, and this is again I want to acknowledge you for this because like I love that you had the family in your video, and it's who you are, and I'm just curious, like a lot of those early trips, did they lay the groundwork for who you are as like this wanderlust adventurer now?
They did. I think my parents never got to travel when they were younger. I think my dad would only travel when he was with my mom's dad because my mom's dad was a mason, so he would travel around the country and do like brickwork wherever. And my dad went out to like Navajo territory, and he would always talk about going to New Mexico. Like, this was this cool trip that he did. And my dad loved the wilderness. And actually, I asked him like a couple months ago. I was like, "Man, I never asked you what you want to do. Like, if you didn't have kids, what would you have done?" And he's like, "I just wanted to be a wilderness guy, like just disappear." So we have a cabin up in the mountains that we literally built from scratch as kids. And we still use it today, and I think that was my dad's like little piece of going out to the wilderness and just doing that. We'd fish all day, all night, and look at the stars.
Where was this cabin?
It's like in the middle of Pennsylvania, up near like Penn State. If you're familiar with that area. But well, I thought they were mountains. Then I came out here and I'm like, oh, Burbank, that's more of a mountain.
I want you to share the story about moving out from Philly. I want you to share the story of the adventures that happened, but also the experience with your father.
Yeah. So there's a couple. I always wanted to live in Los Angeles. Like that was my thing. I went to Temple University. I wanted to go to USC, but I had so many younger brothers and sisters, and I didn't want to be that brother that left. And there's a big gap. So I initially made a cross-country trip with my brother. We moved to San Francisco in January of 2016. We did this epic, like 2.5-week trip. I talked about it at his wedding, and it was incredible. And I saw parts of the country. We literally hit everything because this company paid for the trip, basically. So we just kind of, well, I hope they paid. Because I didn't pay them back. But we initially did this epic trip, and when I got back to Philadelphia, I was like, told my girlfriend at the time, I'm like, hey, I really want to move to LA, and we can figure stuff out, and like, let's do this. And she said, I want to break up. So we broke up, literally that night. And yeah, so basically my trip is I called up a buddy, like we still had a lease together, and it was like 3 months later, and I'm like, I can't do this, and I called a buddy up, and I just threw everything I could in my car, and I just drove out here. And that was like a 3-day trip, just like crying and listening to like John Mayer and like Boyz II Men, and just whipped out here. And then I realized like, shit, I didn't even really get to take advantage of that. So a series of things happened, and I totaled my car, so I had to drive back to LA. Mind you, I moved to LA and I moved onto a boat. I bought a sailboat and had no idea what the hell I was doing. Moved onto this boat. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
And so I drive back home and I get a car, and my dad's like, hey, like, I don't want you driving by yourself. Like, you just got a car, so you killed yourself. You can't handle yourself. So I was like, well then, you never take a break from work. Why don't you come with me? And while we're at it, my little brother, the one here at the end here on the right, I was like, he's coming with. So we just literally, my dad's like, all right, we just started driving, had no clue. I'm like, well, where do you want to stay? Like, I don't know. And like, as we're driving, we literally just looked at the map and we're like, all right, well, we're going to Chicago. And you know what? We're going to hit the Grand Canyon, and we're going to hit Zion, and we're going to hit this place, and this place. And we just did this, like, all over the place. We just did this epic trip across the country. And it was so cool to be able to do that, and be able to, like, have the money and the means to be able to pay for this. Like, the first time that he ever shaved was in Chicago. Like, I walk in on this huge bathroom, and he's in there using my razor. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, nothing. And, like, he's shaving, and I get to see my dad, like, we go out, and I'm like, oh, man, go get some, like, seafood here in Chicago, or let's go get barbecue in Kansas City. And it was just cool to have them be in their like, little Philadelphia world, because it's easy to get in your Philadelphia world. And then just be able to see like how vast and beautiful and eclectic this country is. And so we get to the end of the trip, and we got to California, and we were actually in the like Santa Monica Mountains. And my dad always wants to be the first to do everything. Like, he's got to be first to get shit done, or to like finish a hike or whatever. So we were hiking in like Zion and Yosemite, and he kind of was like slow, and it was kind of weird. And we get to the mountains in Santa Monica, and he's just really like kind of lagging. I'm like, you all right? He's like, yeah, I'm good. And kind of got into arguments, because I was just like, Dad, you don't seem like a good man. Like, drink something or do whatever. So he left, and I didn't really say goodbye. It was kind of like, just 3 weeks on the road. And then the next day, my mom calls me. She's like, sit down. I'm like, yeah. She's like, Dad had a heart attack. And like, we don't know what's going to happen. And it felt like my whole like world crashed, because it was like on one hand, it was so amazing to be able to like travel across the country and to like see all this and experience this with them. But then like any road trip, you get annoyed with somebody, so I was like, fuck, I better just get in there. It's like, shit, I didn't even like really say goodbye. And he's okay now. And now he comes out to California all the time. He wants to visit us, and it's like, hey, let's set this trip up to do this, and let's set this trip up to do that. And like, I don't know if it was that road trip or what it was, but now like, my dad has this wanderlust.
What did you learn from the moment of the not saying goodbye? Was there something there that like kind of take the moments to enjoy or appreciate, or is there something there?
Yeah, it's I don't know. My dad's like my best friend, and just at this moment at the airport, I was kind of annoyed with him because he was being like real stubborn about like I could tell something was wrong. And then it's like, as a kid, you want to be like, oh, like I told you so, but at the same time, I was like, well, I was never have to say goodbye, so.
Plus, the beard really works well for the adventure thing. It does.
People think it's because I'm lazy. It's so, you know what I'm talking about. It's so much work. It's exhausting, and it's expensive. Oils and.
Well, let's do that to segue for a second, because I want to actually talk about this new podcast you're doing.
Yeah.
Which I'm really proud of you.
Thank you
I
very
think
much.
it's good AF.
Your podcast is fantastic as well.
Thanks, dude. We'll talk about that in a second. But so good AF, which Mom, I'll tell you what the AF part is later. Yeah. Anyway, it's good AF. Briefly tell us about what you're doing and who you're talking to.
Yeah. So via social media, I put up this story about something about like beards and hair care and like losing your hair or whatever. And this company reached out to me. This company reached out and they're like, hey, we love your content, we love that you travel, we love that you do all this stuff. Would you like to collaborate for a podcast? So I'm like, all right. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? They're like, well, our company's called Good Guy Wellness. It's like a men's like wellness company. And I'm like, all right, well, let's just sit down and interview guys that are super gnarly in whatever their space is. And instead of talking to them about how they became so successful, let's talk to them about why they're a good person. Like, why are these guys good guys? Because in every case, each guy that I have on, and we're going to get ladies next season, but every guy that we have on, they give back. They're either in other countries giving back, doing like charity works, or they have some kind of foundation, or you know, from wherever they came up. Like everybody has their own story. So you just see this.
You're traveling around to actually interview.
Yeah, and that's the great part is that I got in there and they're like, oh, so what should the travel budget be? And I'm like, oh, all my contacts are in LA. I'm like, oh, like, what were you thinking? The guy's like, I want to find like the guy that does this in the middle of nowhere that no one really knows about. I'm going to highlight these people. I'm like, absolutely. You know, I'm thinking like $20,000. Like, well, like, take it easy. But literally, I have the opportunity to fly all around the country and meet these guys exactly where they are. And I think the very important thing is for my podcast is to make those people feel comfortable in whatever space that they're doing. And I want to go to like their place of work or where they are thriving. And I think that's been the beauty of it because I feel like I get a lot more authentic conversations. Now I have been stood up by a couple people after flying out the places. But you know what? Like,
really?
Yeah. But it's but like that's an experience. You know what I mean? So now I have a reason to be in that city. Now let's figure something out.
Okay.
Because it's not on my dime.
Where was the city?
Luckily, it was Philadelphia.
Okay, well, so that worked out. I really wanted to bring up the podcast because, again, I really want to highlight and acknowledge people who are doing good.
Yeah.
And I really love the authentic space that you come from and excited to see where you go with this and continue to bring up good people. What does travel mean to you?
Oh, man. Shoot, you asked her this when I was thinking about it.
I asked everyone
I had blank.
Yes.
Travel means is, I think for me, it's just adventure. And it's kind of like what you were saying before, travel, like you don't have to go across to the ends of the globe. Like, Hope hates it because I always say, like, whenever I go somewhere, like, we're just in New Zealand, in Australia, or I'm in London or wherever, and I'm always like, this reminds me of, somewhere back home. I do that all the time. And then I realized, like, you don't have to go to all these crazy places. Like, there's so much stuff, like, right in our backyard that's incredible. So I think for travel, for me, it's just that adventure, in whatever adventure it means to you, because it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, my brother had an adventure just coming over here from Santa Monica.
Which again, thank you. Huge acknowledgement for anyone, like myself, who came from the West Side tonight. I totally appreciate you guys. Thank you.